Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I've been with the Sisters of Life for about 8 years and in their Hope and Healing ministry. And this is my story of healing and hope. I was raised Catholic, but I really didn't know my faith, and my father taught me how to pray the Hail Mary and to cross myself whenever I was bad or grouchy, but I didn't know my faith. And I stopped going to church with my dad probably shortly after my confirmation. And when I was 18 years old and a senior in high school, I became involved with a 20-year-old man from Queens. Within 6 months of that relationship, I became pregnant. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't even understand it. And I was so afraid and so isolated, and I reached out to no one. The only thing that he offered me, the only choice, was abortion. He didn't want to marry me. He said if I really loved him, I would get rid of it. But surprisingly, I was filled with joy. I had these moments of immense joy where I was so excited that I was pregnant, but then they would follow with moments of sheer terror and panic. And the weeks went by and I didn't know what to do. And finally, I ended up in a doctor's office with my boyfriend for my first abortion. I was very angry. I didn't know where this anger was coming from, but it welled up deep from within. I go to college, still with the same boy, graduate, start working, 22 years old. I get pregnant again. But this time it'll be different. We're both working. No, I'm not ready to be a father yet. I'm not ready to be married to you yet. I don't remember a lot about that second abortion. I, again, didn't reach out to anyone. I was in deep, dark despair, isolated, didn't talk to anyone. No one knew about that second one. We eventually got married. A few years later, he promised me we would have children, but we didn't. And 4 years into that marriage, we never talked about those two children. And I was angry. I was angry at myself. And I would clench my fists and I would defend a woman's right to choose because I had to. But in my heart, that's not what I felt. So after those years of marriage, I hated him, I hated myself. I pushed him out of my life. I divorced him. And then I met a very wonderful Catholic young man. I fell deeply in love with him. But I couldn't remember if I'd ever told him about my abortions. And after 10 years of being together, we were married in an Episcopalian service, neither one of us knowing what our Catholic faith was or how that it would even look in this relationship. But I remember the day we were getting our marriage license. I looked at him and I loved him so much and I thought, did I tell him? Does he know? I'm entering into a marriage with a man I've been with for 10 years, and I've been putting this out of my life for so long that I can't remember. But I love him. I'm going to lose him. He won't want me. So I decide then and there, I'm going to my grave with this sin, with this secret. No one will ever know about it. Well, a few years into our marriage, my husband starts feeling this intense draw back to the faith, back to church, back to God. And I see this amazing change in him. And the bulletins are piling up in the living room, and he's been going to church during the week. And after a few weeks, he invites me into this special invitation of coming back to church. I don't know what that is or what it means, but he said, well, it means we need to have our marriage recognized by the church. That means we need to go to confession. I hadn't been to confession. I avoided the church. And he handed me a pamphlet, how to make a good confession. He was so excited about this. He was so changed. But where do I fit in? Am I forgiven? Can I go back into the church? I didn't know. And he said, oh, and this priest I've been talking to says we need to pray the rosary. I'd never prayed the rosary in my life. So he shows me how to do it on my iPhone. So for 4 days, I pray the rosary. And on the 4th day, I just say, what? Now what? And I hear it. Confess. But I still don't know where I fit in. So I run home. I'm making dinner. Right before dinner, I start crying. I'm on the floor and I'm crying to my husband, and I said, I've done something terrible. It can't be. I'm not forgiven. You won't be able to come back into the church because of me, something that I did 29 years ago. I had an abortion. I didn't know what I was doing. And he looks at me and he takes me by the shoulders and he says, oh my gosh, of course you can be forgiven. That's what Jesus did for us. This is what you've been holding on to all these years. And he smiled and he held me and he said, but we have to get you to a priest. You need to go to confession. So the next day, I wake up, I call the rectory. He's been talking to this priest. They tell me, come on down. And I get in that car. And it's the hardest thing I have to do. How can I tell a priest what I've done when I can't even formulate it into words myself? I don't know what I've done. It was so long ago, I can't even remember how. All I know is that I was terrified. I held onto the steering wheel and I prayed the only prayer that I've been praying for the last 4 days, the Hail Mary full of grace, Hail Mary full of grace. And I hear that voice. You don't have to do this. It's too hard. Go home. What about the second one? Are you going to tell him about that one? And I finally make it to the rectory. I ring the bell, the door opens, and this very warm, friendly priest opens the door. I want to blurt out my story. He takes me in and he sees my face. He sees it's deep. I said, Father, it's been 29 years. He says, I'll take you step by step. So he takes me commandment by commandment. And then he says, have you ever supported, coerced, procured, or had an abortion? And I said, yes. And he said, how many? And I said, 2. And that was it. He said, God knows your reasons. He granted me absolution. And he bent over as if to pick up a lamb and put it on his shoulder. And he said, all of heaven rejoices when one sinner repents. Welcome home. I walked out of the rectory, and it was every cliche. The sky was bluer, the grass was greener, and I had fallen in love with a God that I never knew existed. I was so elated. I was free. The priest continued to help my husband and I with our sacrament of marriage. And 3 months later, we were married in the church. And then I felt this draw in my heart to participate in pro-life activities. So I drove to our local pro-life life chain. I couldn't get out of the car. They were holding signs, abortion, red letters. The word abortion would make the blood rush out of my face, it would make my knees weak. And I remembered the priest had told me during my confession that I needed healing, that I had suffered. That was it. I was suffering. He told me about the Sisters of Life. So I ran back to my church. I looked at the back of the church, and there are these pamphlets, Hope and Healing After Abortion, Sisters of Life. And it took me a while to make an appointment, but I did. I sent an email. And I went to my first day of prayer and healing. It was a battle. It took me a while. And I walked up to the convent door. I'd never seen a sister life before, and there they are. And she welcomed me. There wasn't an ounce of judgment or condemnation. It was warm. And she led me into the chapel. And I knelt there, and I felt this warm blanket of love wrap around me. And I didn't know how, but I knew that my healing would start here. I knew it. I wanted it. And the sisters progressed through that day, and they used words like mercy and forgiveness and trust and courageous. They told me I was a mother. I don't have any living children, but that my 2 aborted children, they were children, and they're in heaven with our Blessed Mother, and they love me, and they want me to be with them. I'd never heard that before. It all made sense. That's what I'd been feeling all those years. Alone and isolated, I was suffering, I was grieving. The sisters allowed me to reclaim my motherhood. Through the mercy of Jesus, through their ministry, they transformed my 2 abortions from procedures of death to a gift of motherhood. It transformed me, the mercy of Jesus, from a woman full of fear and resentment and regret and shame to a woman who now stands before you with joy and hope and love, and a hope that a future is so much more brighter. And I know now who I am through their ministry. I am a beloved daughter of God. I'm his beloved, and I love him.